Well, welcome. This is the next in the series of conversations I've been having in conjunction with my residency here at Arts Place in Annapolis Royal, Nova Scotia. And I'm talking to Susan Tooke today, and I want to thank you for taking the time to come in. Really looking forward to talking to you, because we've had a few conversations already,
Right.
and I've realized that there's quite a bit of resonance between our practices,
Right.
more and more.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm looking forward to it. And for those of you who don't know, so Susan is a major Canadian artist and has worked across many disciplines and media: painting, drawing, book illustration, textiles, media,
Murals.
murals. I'm missing, I knew I was going to miss some.
I've done a bit of everything. I think my curiosity gets the better of me sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I encourage people who are watching this to go on Susan's website, because you get a sense of the breadth of that, and that's one thing that comes across is this kind of constant sense of exploration, and it's really quite an amazing body of work to see. And in particular, most recently, and the first time we met was when you had the show here, the Altered Visions, Altered Sound
Right,
show, which was
yes.
about image and sound from nature, and you were collaborating with Dylan
Tompkins. Yes.
Terrible memory for names, but it was a very interesting collaboration for me, and really timely, because I'm coming at it from quite a different door, but in many ways looking at some of the same things about the natural and human world, or the human world and the non-human world, and how forms that are generated from both. There seems to be some reciprocal relationship between that and an exploration of that. So looking at those images was quite amazing. I hope you'll talk about that a little bit more. And so this residency I'm doing is these little short videos with improvised guitar. But there seems to be a real commonality between what we're trying to explore, the natural world and the world of art.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, I'm really pleased you're going to do this, and maybe you could just talk about that show a bit, but maybe in terms of your broader practice and how you got there, but also where it's going to go from here, that whole exploration.
Oh, yes.
Oh.
Well, I'm a painter, but I also studied film, video, sound. I was a mentee at the Center for Art Tapes, and then a mentor, and so I'm intrigued by environments. And when I came up with the idea for altered vision, altered sound, and we have some altered sound going on in the background.
Quite altered. Yeah. Right. We'll just act as if that's a very deliberate avant-garde thing.
It is. It's what we do. Yeah. So I was thinking about my images, and my images evolved from early on. It was high realism, social realism, and through book illustration, and then into abstract. I was at a residency in Economy, Nova Scotia, and happened to be walking along a beach and looked down. Instead of looking out, I looked down at the ground. And in the swash zone, there are various collections of items that make their own composition. And that really twigged my imagination, and I started drawing from those odd bits and pieces, and then thinking of the ground and the layers underneath over time, and how these images are transient. Everything on the surface is transient. And at a slower pace, everything as it goes into the Earth's crust is at a slower rate. So I was interested in creating abstractions that would feed on that. But you know, I know people will look at an abstract painting and maybe not quite get that, get the imagery that or the meaning of the imagery. So to combine it with sound, I was curious as to what would happen when people would interpret an image with a soundscape that plays along with it. And I was also curious about how soundscapes from a rural or a wilderness area, how they relate to something that is urban cityscape, and how you could, you know, how you tell them apart, what you can do to, can you make the sounds of a city from the sounds of the wilderness? How can you layer things and play with sound, and how do you get there? So that I used. I went out and collected sound. I had created paintings. I went out and collected sound from deep in the woods, and it was interesting to me that even deep in the woods, you can hear traffic. You can hear planes overhead. You know, humanity is omnipresent, no matter what. But I also went up to Halifax to get urban sounds, and walked into the food court of Halifax Shopping Center, and I was hit by a wall of sound. And the clatter of everything, the noise of everything was just huge. So I would take these recordings and I would bring them into various software and then break them apart and reconfigure them and layer them and present them with the paintings. And visitors had the ability to comment on sheets that were there. And so it was interesting seeing how people reacted.
And how did they react? Was there any one sort of overall pattern, or was it just all over the place?
Well, it was interesting. There were some people that were absolutely freaked out by some of the sounds. And others that were really enjoying it. My 6-year-old granddaughter was fascinated by the sounds, and you know, when they visited, and then but the next time they came down, she said, "Grammy, I want to go listen," and I said, "I'm sorry, it's not there anymore." But we also had something that we called grid block. And Dylan was great in that he had the ability technically to create this game.
Yeah, that was amazing.
And it was a series of blocks that were movable. And if you put a block into a space, it would trigger a sound, a specific sound.
I remember that.
And the more blocks you put into this grid, you would build up that soundscape. Which was a lot of fun. It was really interesting, and I'd like to take that further and try to understand what people enjoy in a soundscape. I mean, what do they find appealing?
It's just really interesting hearing you say that. I mean, from the point of view, I've been playing improvised music for a long time. And one of the things about that kind of music is it's not everybody's cup of tea, right?
Right.
You know,
yes.
It's atonal, freeform music, and but from almost the other side of the coin, when you put it with an image, people sort of relax and they're no longer trying to solve the problem of the avant-garde that's being presented to them. They just sort of listen and come into this sort of spontaneous creativity because they're looking at this thing. And even with these videos, I've had a few people saying, "Oh, now I understand your music." Like relatives
Yes.
of mine, who always, I could tell they didn't like it. That's okay. You don't have to like it. You don't have to like everything, but it seems to relax people in some way. It's almost, and you're saying that about abstract paintings, and I know that lots of people are just like want a figurative thing happening, and so there's an interesting parallel that when you combine them, in like with the game, I got that from your work that it's very generous and inviting people. You're really asking people to come in, even if they can decide if they don't like it or they like it or whatever. But it's very open that way, and I got that from that show. It's very the experience. You're thinking about the experience of it as not just about how do I express myself, which is part of it. It's very expressive too.
Yes.
It has to be expressive. That's what we do, but also it's also very, very open and inviting to people to enter into that. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does make sense. There's something that occurred to me when you were talking was people would spend more time with the imagery when they had the sound available.
Right. Interesting.
And in the exhibit, they had the opportunity to say, does this seem to go with this image, or is there, how do you feel? It responds, and so those responses were quite something, and you keep, every time you do something like this, you see another door opening,
right,
where you want to go through and examine that as well.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that, but just what you said about them taking more time, because it's very easy to walk through an art gallery and just skim, basically, and like walk through the Louvre until you get to the Mona Lisa, whatever. I mean, there's no time, but sound is in time.
Yes.
Inherently, that's the medium of sound, music, or soundscape. And so you're kind of inviting people to kind of stay a little longer and look at the visuals. But go ahead.
We were with your last interview, and with talking about poetry and talking about improvisation, and while that was going on, I thought that what is engaging about abstract art for the artist is that you begin with something and then you carry on through it, and you are responding to what it is that you've just created. So it's got a sort of improvisational quality to it. And just as you stop eventually, you will decide when you're done exploring that. The same thing with my paintings. You know when you're done.
So that's interesting, because that's very much like with improvised music. You say, well, how can you be playing? You have no key, you have no meter. Well, you're playing because if there's a sound, there's another sound that it's calling for. And as you get better at this, not every musician can even do this. But if you get so you can reach for that sound on your instrument or your voice or whatever. But it is a little bit the same thing. It's like there's a form there that's asking for another form. What is that form? And so it sounds a little bit the same.
I know. Often intentionally, when an idea occurs to me, I will think, that's too obvious, I want to do the opposite. I want to see what happens when I do the opposite.
Well, again, that's when you're improvising. You think you're playing with other people, and that's the best kind of improvisation when it involves more than one person. And it doesn't mean you know when you hear a pattern like da-dum, 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 dum, you don't do the same thing. Sometimes you do something radically different on purpose, not oppositional, but because it's more interesting.
Yeah.
You do something that sort of cuts through it. You mentioned also when you're talking about the layers when you were first looking into this, and that's been one of the things in this recent work of mine. And by the way, I'm not a visual artist, so it's all fresh, it's all new.
But you are looking as a visual artist. You really
for
are.
the first, well, I wouldn't say the first time, but I mean I've been surrounded by visual artists all my life, so I've always thought I don't have to do that, you know. So now I'm looking all the time, you know, like it's a windy day today, and I was like, wow, everything is moving. There's so much energy, and I'm looking at all these patterns. But one of the things that I've realized, and it'd be interesting if this is in your experience too, that I'll make a video and I'll take it home and look at it, and I'll see all sorts of things I didn't see when I was shooting it, and mostly. Most of these layered things. So, for instance, you know, the Lake Midway, where I live, you know, you can go there on a sunny day, and the sun's reflecting on the surface of the water, and it's reflecting on the ripples that's caused by the wind, and then there's a current underneath, and there's a layer, and then you look and you see there's the bottom, and then you see, if you look at, especially if you project it big, you say, oh, there's a fish, there's some fish down there. And so you're thinking about it in a layered way. And then I started to reflect, well, that's exactly how human experience works too. We're having a sensory experience. We're having an emotional experience. We've got all the language, the chattering going on in our heads going on, and on and on and on, which is a little bit like the Buddhists call skandhas, you know, the layers of experience. So there's this kind of continuity of experience of these layers, and they're all moving, and they're all interacting. And some of them are transparent; you can see through. Some of them are opaque, and some are translucent, like the light can come through, and then it's so there's a huge amount of interaction, and then the interaction between the human layers, and then adding sound is adding another layer.
But the sound itself is a layer. When I go in and record sound, there are, you know, all kinds of layers of sound happening that are interacting with each other. And so the idea of I think you should go out and record yourself looking, or record or not even record, just go out and with your guitar and play in response. I think Yo-Yo Ma did this with the cello and played in the woods in response to the sounds there.
I have done that. I play harmonica too. Sometimes I take it when I go for a walk and play, but that's an interesting thing, because I have to make a decision when I come home and look at my little video. The sound is being recorded. For example, I just made one in the historical gardens area. I know what the sound's going to be. It's going to be this huge beating of the wind on that little mic.
Right.
Now I have to decide, do I want that? Sometimes I do, sometimes, quite often I do, and sometimes I'll put down, sometimes I take it out. I want there to be big areas of silence, but it is a little, but it's interesting. That is an interesting idea, to actually go out and record right in it as well.
Become part of it.
Yeah.
So you become part of it. And it would be, I mean, it's very possible that you would have birdsong interacting with you. I don't know. I mean, it might pull something else out. But
I mean, I once was down at the shore. I used to go and sit there, and I would take a cup of tea, and I had my harmonica, and I was playing the harmonica, and around the corner came this coyote.
Oh, yes.
And the coyote then went behind a little tree all the way and started like yapping and barking and everything. And so I played another note, and then from behind me came the voices of at least 2, maybe 3 coyotes singing.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
And I thought, oh, what is it? And so I played again, and they sang again. I don't know how long it went on for a minute.
They were going to adopt you.
Or they were deciding whether I was suitable prey.
Look, he's still playing, and we're about to eat him.
I know, but you know, it's funny you say that because I never followed up. Not the coyote thing, but in terms of really interacting. Because I come home and I edit.
Yes.
You know, digitally on there. That's a really interesting idea.
Yeah. Well, I was, you know, with sound and with these different programs that I use, I'm able to isolate sounds, take and alter them, stretch them, or change the pitch, or create rhythms with them with a MIDI controller sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then you're putting together this composition, and of course, then you're finding patterns as a human that, and you're trying to, I don't know what you're trying to do, but it's but you're reacting, and you're finding these new sounds. My absolute favorite sound that I recorded was of a wood thrush, and they are endangered, and they live at the edge of a forest, and the sound was so pure and so beautiful, and knowing that would be missing in the future, or could very well be missing in the future, was really really, and I haven't heard it since. That was when I was recording for this show.
So that's where your own feelings and expression come in. It's not just sort of a scientific inquiry about that you, and even the choices you make are expressive.
Yes.
Why do you do this? Why do you bring that up and not that? You know.
Right.
So it's entirely expressive. But I mean, I love that the soundscapes really. You know, it does make a difference what kind of equipment you have, because you're missing. You know, this is something that's sort of missing from mine, because I'm using an iPhone, which is fine.
They're quite amazing, and they're available to you, so you catch things you might not have, and to haul a bunch of equipment. But I've got a small Zoom 8H recorder,
One of those,
and it does a beautiful job.
They
And
have
you can connect other mics to it, like contact mics.
That's interesting, because I have one of those, and they have great, you know, omnidirectional mics too and stuff. Incredibly high quality. I've actually made a couple of CDs using one of those in a room. Like they good. I had them mixed and mastered after, but still, you know, who needs a studio? You know, but that's a really interesting thing to think more about the sound, because I'm really the actual soundscape. I'm not really attending it to it very much. I'm putting it down as a layer beneath the music, and you know what was interesting you say about the urban sounds, because I live right near a highway, on a highway basically, so I can be fairly far back in my woodlot. And at first I was like, oh, another goddamn car, like they're wrecking my video. And then I thought, why am I saying that? This big whoosh of white noise is just quite gorgeous. Comes from the distance and then recedes.
Can be, yes. Oh my goodness. And I did a recording. I was on Elm Street, where I used to live in Halifax. And I happened to be recording when 2 cars past each other, and the sounds that I got, and I altered it a bit, but that, what is the term for something coming and receding? there is a term, audio term for
Oh,
it. But,
okay, yeah. Yeah.
But it became this beautiful
Yeah.
sound. But I'm wondering, with your improvised music, do you ever improvise with your improvisation? It's hard to say, but going back and layering it again.
I do actually.
Yeah.
I do, and it's kind of like a trade secret. Because sometimes I will go back and do another track, and the other thing that's sort of a trade secret is I can't hear the other track on iMovie, and at first I thought, well, how's that going to work? It always works. It's just as if it's composed. And so I can see the visual, I can see on a movie it shows you like the sound,
yeah,
but I can't hear it.
Right.
All I can do is listen to it and say, okay, I'm entering into that same space, but there's something I want to add to it. And then I listen to it later and I think, well, I couldn't have made those two sounds work better together and so a lot of it is about letting go of my control and trusting that those forms will form themselves. And at first I thought, oh, that's not going to work. It actually works really, really well.
It's like, what's the worst that can happen? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you're looking at the pattern. You can see the pattern. You can see the frequency.
Yeah.
You can see so you've got a sense of the timeline.
Yeah.
And so you can react to that. And
in my memory, I've got the other sound. I've listened to it a few times, so I kind of say, it really needs this or that. But I'm not really cueing it that much to the visual. Not exactly. I'm more just. The thing is, I'm looking at the video.
Okay.
That I looked at the first time, and it's like when we used to play back in the 80s. I played with a group. We played with a lot of silent movies. We do improvised music scores, and we found we didn't all have to watch the movie. And people would come up afterwards and say, "Oh, that was so beautifully scored." Everything was queued up. It was amazing. The group of 5 people, as long as one person was watching the movie.
Yes, they keep you kind of connected.
A little bit.
One thing that we did do was improvise with my soundscapes and showing the live spectrograms. With the musicians. So we had voice, we had percussion, we had viola, flute.
Oh, this is that's the one you showed me. That was so good.
And cello, and they it's recorded. It's on Vimeo. And so people can go there and
I encourage people to
it.
look at that. The playing is quite beautiful on that. And it's kind of like giving people a score.
Yes.
And just saying, respond to this. And I think for musicians, a lot of musicians who are really serious professional musicians and practice all day, every day, it's very hard for them to just improvise quite often. Like jazz musicians, surprisingly, many of I've played with great jazz musicians who can't just play. Because they are practiced. They have this body memory of all these patterns and don't make mistakes and stuff. And we're saying, well, this is all mistakes, So, but when you give people that visual cue, it even frees up the musicians because they can let go of their skills a little bit and just say, well, actually, this looks like it needs that kind of sound or that kind of sound.
But they weren't looking at the image. That was behind them. So they were reacting to the soundscapes and feeding off that. And they really had a wonderful time. I mean, they came up and they said, we enjoyed this so much. And I was almost in tears. It was so moving to see them responding.
So that was almost a year ago, right?
Yeah.
So where did that go from there? From that experience and with the musicians,
Yes.
but the whole show, and you got a lot of feedback from people. Have you?
Right.
Did that open any new directions for you?
I have ideas. I'd like to expand on some of it, but I also have this idea of, looking at sound visually, coming up with notation or drawings that will trigger certain sounds. So coming up with an alphabet of sound that I can then create a soundscape
Oh, yeah.
by my drawing.
Yeah.
I'm going to be playing with that idea.
And would there be software that would help you to do that, or is that just something?
Yeah. But I'm looking at, for example, you look at a certain bird call, and you can draw that, right?
Yes.
Right. So you can draw that, and you can create these little figures that will actually.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I want to show you something. I gotta go and reach it. I'm going out of the video, but one of the things that got me going on this, that's a little bit like that, or you can tell me if you think it is. This is a book that I had on my shelf. I took off the shelf randomly when I was doing this a few years ago, and it's really what got me thinking about that. Drawing and music, but mostly about how the music responds to this moment.
Right.
And so this is a folio by a Lightning painter named Tooke, put out by the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Wow.
And it's a real virtuoso piece, because each one is facing pages is a very important poet, important calligrapher, and important painter. So what each one has is in a completely different style, completely different mood. So the style of calligraphy.
So who decided to put the image with the calligraphy?
He did it all.
Oh.
It's all him. So this is not, there's no music, there's no sonic side to this, but it's more kind of a parallel about how he entered into this moment.
Yes.
And it's all natural. It's a moment in nature, but it's also an emotional moment, and there's this style of calligraphy very much the same. So it tells me that painters can do that, and like this, look at the calligraphy is completely different.
Yes.
On this, and expressive in a completely different way. So this guy had the chops to do a whole folio of this, but I don't know exactly how that relates, except it just tells me when you're talking about drawing like that, it's very spontaneous, but when you do that, you're bringing a lifetime of practice as a painter and as a visual artist, that you can respond in that spontaneous way, fairly freely, and yet get it right, get that feeling, of. So I don't know exactly how that relates.
Well, I'm wondering with the example that you just showed, does the poem relate to the image?
Yes.
Okay, because I can't tell because I can't read it.
It does.
But each one of those figures in the calligraphy, in the writing, it would be interesting to see what they sound like through this software.
When you say that, I realize I misspoke. Of course there's a sound element. There's the poetry, and it would be the same thing. Like poetry is making the sounds of the words into music. That's the essence of poetry, with an image, and it's layered. There's a layer of the tone of voice, there's a layer of the image, there's the layer of that sound and the meaning.
And the timing. The
rhythm. And so these, at the same time as being quite a sort of spontaneous moment, it's also everything's very, very coherent, and in that one moment. So it just sounded like when you're talking about doing the drawing and generating sounds out of it, it's got that spontaneity. And it'd be fantastic to see that. So how is that going to become a new project?
That's a new project.
Is it?
Yeah, that's what I'm diving into. I'm preoccupied during our summers with being out on the land and working with the property, but that's its own kind of meditation in a way. And so I'm thankful when everything slows down and I get back in the studio, and now I'm kind of raring to get at it with my drawing and my painting and the sound. Yeah.
And actually that's another kind of overlap between our practices, because when I'm here, I'm in the woods quite a lot. I'm on the lake a lot. I wrote a whole book of poetry about my morning paddles and stuff. And I've never thought about it as part of my practice, but then I realized, of course it is.
When you talk, and this is kind of just occurred to me, but when you talk about the canoe and you're out on the water, I had an experience where I was working on a project, and I was going to these various locations, documenting different points along a transect line, and it took me onto a lake in early morning, just still, and the mirror images of the rocks, and it was silent, and it was beautiful, and it was incredible. I'm sure you must have seen that.
I stopped doing it, but I had a period where I would go every morning, and I missed that. But somebody stole my canoe.
Oh.
Yes, so I got another canoe now. I do, but I haven't been doing it. I used to do it like every day.
Yeah.
Because it's a minute away from where I live. I just walk over there. I leave my canoe over there.
You got a canoe with a lock? Did you?
Didn't matter.
No.
People say, "Oh, must have been the tourists who did it."
Oh.
Yeah.
Could blame them.
Right. Anyway, it is similar, and it is similar to East Asian art too. There's so much of it is about being in the wilderness, and not in the sort of 19th century romantic version of the wilderness, but really, really being there. And I mean, I grew up in a small town and in downtown Toronto. I didn't grow up with that, but I've become extremely attached to it. I couldn't live without it, and it sounds like you might be the same.
I grew up in the country. I grew up in rural New Jersey and visited my grandparents in rural Ontario, and everything. I was in the woods every day. Yeah. So.
You were on the call yesterday with Guy Ewing, my friend from Toronto, the poet. He is from rural New Jersey as well.
No kidding.
Yeah. And he does go back to the family homestead.
Right.
And people don't realize that about New Jersey, that it has wilderness. It's not all.
It's not all.
Palisades Park.
No.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. Well, thanks very much for doing this. And
you're
I
welcome.
want to say there's another connection between our work, and that is I saw that you worked with Lucas Pierce.
Yes.
He's a friend. I've worked
no
with
kidding.
him quite a lot, and we've done projects. I did a project with him where he had video. He was improvising the video.
Yes.
He was like shooting us musicians and then putting. It was amazing putting on the screen, and then we were playing to the screen. And he's a wonderful guy. Yeah. And I thought
we'll have to because he was part of a collaborative team. Lucas Pierce and Veronique McKenzie and me. Veronique is a choreographer, movement dancer, and we did several pieces.
Well, that's an interesting area, another conversation. But when I was in Taiwan, I worked with dancers a little bit, and it reminded me a bit of that because we put the video on, and so they were dancing with the video. But we did one. I'll send it to you. There were two dancers. One was also a videographer, and she shot the video, dancing around the other dancer.
Yes.
And
yes.
then my video was in the background, and we were playing music along with it.
Right.
And it was just kind of a jam, but was you know, that's an area I want to explore as well. And you know, but this
This sounds like lots of fun.
yeah, why not? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great connection. Well, again, thanks for doing this.
You're
I think
very
this
welcome.
is going to be a really interesting contribution to this whole series of conversations.
Thank you, Arthur. It was
Yeah.
my pleasure.
Great. Good.